Gussets are essentially plates used to reinforce corners. However, creating them as plates can be tedious and time-consuming. To make this process more efficient, SOLIDWORKS offers the gusset feature. Gussets can be created between any two planar faces that intersect at an angle between 0 and 180 degrees. To create a gusset, click the gusset icon on the Weldment toolbar. This brings up the Gusset Property Manager. In the first selection window, select the two faces you wish to join with the gusset. The gusset can be created in one of two shapes, triangular or polygonal. Select the shape you wish to use using one of these buttons. I'll be using polygonal in this example. The size of the gusset is controlled using the values in the Property Manager. Each value is labeled to correspond with the dimensions shown on the Shape button above. I'll enter values for D1, D2, and D3. The final dimension can be specified using either D4 or entering an angle. In this case, I'll use a 45-degree angle. Next, there's an icon allowing me to add a chamfer to the gusset. I'll activate it, and you can see I have a few dimensions to define like I did before. I'll enter a value for D5, and I have a choice to either define the dimension of D6 or an angle. I'll use another 45-degree angle. The thickness of the gusset is defined in this field. I'll enter 0.5 as the thickness and specify how the thickness should be applied using these buttons. You have the option of adding thickness to one side or the other, or adding an equal amount of material to each side. I'll be using the both sides option here. You can see a preview of the gusset as we've defined it so far. The only remaining question is where to position the gusset. Should it be on one end of the members? Should it be in the center? It's up to you to decide. By using the location buttons at the bottom of the Property Manager, you can choose either side or the center. If you'd like to define an offset, simply check the Offset option and enter a value. The offset distance is measured from whichever point you've selected above. If you've selected the center point, the offset is measured from the center. If you wish to change the offset to the opposite side, click the Flip Offset Direction button. In this case, I'll use the center location without using an offset. When I click OK, the gusset is complete. Next, I'll close off the end of this structural member using an end cap. The end cap feature is found on the Weldment toolbar. When you select the end cap icon, the end capped Property Manager appears. End caps can be applied to open ends of structural members. The only requirement is that the profile of the member must have linear edges. That means you can't use this feature to cap round tubes. To define an end cap, first select the end face of the structural member. When you do this, a preview of the end cap will appear in the graphics area. Notice the selection box allows me to select multiple faces at a time, so I'll select the other end face of this part. Next, I'll specify the thickness direction with these icons here. I can choose outward or inward. Notice when I choose inward, the preview looks as though it will be created inside the tube, but if I press OK, notice the tube has been shortened to make room for the end cap. An inward end cap simply means that the end cap will not extend past the original length of the structural member. I'll click on the end cap feature and edit the feature once again. The next step is to specify the thickness of the cap. Once the thickness is defined, you can specify the size of the cap. By default, this is set using a thickness ratio. This ratio can be any value from 0 to 1. A thickness ratio of 0 means the cap will be the exact size as the outer surface of the tube. On the other extreme, a ratio of 1 results in a cap the size of the inner surface of the tube. I'll use a ratio of 0.5 in this case, which results in a cap that overlaps halfway over the tube thickness. If you do not wish to use a ratio, you can uncheck the option and simply enter an offset value. Finally, you can enable the option to chamfer the sharp corners of the end cap. A single dimension defines the size of all 4 chamfers. I'll click OK and the end cap is complete. As we've seen with other features, such as the plate and gusset, the end cap is a separate solid body. This means it can appear as a separate item in the Weldment cut list. We'll take a close look at cut lists in a later lesson.